Listen closely, because the moment you're about to relive didn't come with gunfire or armies on the move, and there were no crowds in the streets or flags being raised, yet it quietly changed the value of every dollar that has existed since, reshaped the world economy, and created the financial system you're living inside right now. A system built on debt, illusion, and a promise that died on a Sunday night in August of 1971. Most people have never watched the broadcast. Most people don't even know why it happened. And yet every mortgage payment, every credit card balance, every rent increase, every bubble, every crash, every bailout, every moment of inflation you feel in your life, they all trace back to that single moment when Richard Nixon looked into the camera and calmly did something no leader of a major global power had ever dared to do. He killed money, not in a symbolic way, not in a metaphorical way, but in a literal, structural, irreversible way that the world still hasn't fully understood. Because before that night, the dollar wasn't just a currency, it was a promise made to the world at the end of World War II, a promise forged at Bretton Woods in 1944 when the U.S. told every nation on Earth, "If you trust the dollar, we will redeem it for gold." A fixed rate, a guarantee backed by the full weight of the American empire. And for a while, people believed it. For a while, the system worked. For a while, the world rebuilt itself using American gold, American credit, American power. For a while, the United States really was the financial center of gravity around which the entire world spun. But then something else began happening. Something quieter, more dangerous. Something nobody voted for and nobody fully understood at the time. The United States began printing more dollars than it had gold to redeem. And that right there is where our story truly begins. To understand why 1971 mattered, you have to go back to the moment in 1944 when the world was on its knees, when Europe was a graveyard, when Asia was burning, and when the United States, alone among the major powers, sat untouched, industrially intact, and overflowing with gold, literally controlling over 2/3 of all the gold on Earth. The solution seemed obvious. Let the United States anchor the global system. Let the dollar become the backbone. Let the world trade through America's stability. Every nation agreed that if the United States held the gold, they would trust the dollar. And for a generation, they did. Factories in Germany hummed again. Japan rebuilt itself into an exporting powerhouse. France transformed its economy. Britain held on to the remnants of its empire a little longer. All of it, absolutely all of it, depended on the idea that the dollar was as good as gold. But a system based on trust begins eroding the moment the issuer of that trust starts bending its own rules. And America, victorious, wealthy, confident America, began bending those rules faster than anyone expected. By the late 1950s, other countries began to notice something odd. Dollars were piling up overseas far faster than gold was being shipped out. At first it seemed harmless. Europe was rebuilding, trade was growing, demand for dollars was rising. But behind the scenes, two storms were forming. The first storm was domestic. America was spending beyond its means, running huge deficits, expanding social programs, and trying to maintain a global military presence that no nation in history had ever attempted. The second storm was international. Other nations, especially France under President Charles de Gaulle, realized the math didn't add up. They saw a simple truth. The United States was printing more claims on gold than there was gold to cover them. So France did something bold. In 1965, de Gaulle sent a battleship, an actual naval vessel, to New York Harbor to redeem dollars for physical gold and bring it back to Europe. The message was unmistakable. We don't trust your paper. We want the real thing. And France wasn't alone. The gold drain accelerated. Tons of gold left Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve vaults. Confidence cracked. The world began whispering a question nobody had dared ask before. What happens if the United States runs out of gold? That question terrified Nixon. Because he knew the truth. If every country tried to redeem their dollars at once, America wouldn't have enough gold to pay even a fraction of it. The empire was over-leveraged. The global system was a pyramid built on trust. And that trust was dissolving fast. By 1971, the crisis reached its peak. Inflation was rising. Unemployment was rising. The Vietnam War was burning through billions of dollars a month. And foreign governments were demanding gold at a pace the U.S. could not sustain. In the first 6 months of 1971, over $22 billion in gold redemption requests hit the U.S. Treasury, more than the previous 2 years combined. The gold window was bleeding out. Nixon's advisors presented him with a brutal truth behind closed doors. If we don't stop redemptions now, we will lose every last ounce of gold within weeks. Some wanted capital controls, some wanted emergency taxes, some wanted a devaluation of the dollar. But none of those solutions stopped the bleeding. There was only one move left, one drastic, unprecedented, world-changing move. Close the gold window, end the promise. Break the system. It was supposed to be temporary. It was presented as temporary. But everyone in the room knew it was permanent. And so, on August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon walked up to the microphone, looked calmly into the camera, and in one of the most consequential speeches in human economic history, announced that the United States would suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. The world didn't understand it at first. It sounded like a technical adjustment, a temporary policy shift, a small administrative detail. But it wasn't. It was the end of the old world. What Nixon did that night was not simply close a window. He ended the gold standard, killed the Bretton Woods system, and transformed the dollar from a currency backed by a physical asset into a currency backed by nothing but faith. You could argue that money died that night, and a new kind of money was born. A type of money that could be printed endlessly. A type of money that could inflate without limit. A type of money governments could weaponize. The consequences arrived almost immediately. Prices began rising, the dollar weakened. Oil-producing nations demanded compensation for the falling value of U.S. currency. And by 1973, the world was hit with an oil shock that sent inflation into the double digits. The old financial order crumbled. The new one, the one we live in today, hardened into place. Most people don't know what happened next, because the United States realized that if the dollar was no longer backed by gold, it had to be backed by something else. Something the world couldn't live without. So in 1974, Washington struck a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis agreed to sell oil exclusively in U.S. dollars. In return, America guaranteed military protection and access to weapons. This deal forced every nation on Earth to hold dollars if they wanted to buy oil. And just like that, the dollar became the world's reserve currency again. Not by gold, not by promise, not by trust, but by force of necessity. But it came with a dark side. A system built on debt, a system built on deficits, a system built on constant money creation, a system that rewarded speculation over savings, bubbles over stability, and short-term gains over long-term health. A system that now, in our time, is beginning to crack. Every problem you see today, the housing bubble, the great financial crisis, the everything bubble, the national debt explosion, the constant inflation, the wealth gap, the de-dollarization wave, all of it can be traced back to the moment Nixon killed gold convertibility. Because without gold, governments stopped limiting themselves. Without limits, debt exploded. Without constraints, central banks became the gods of the economy. And once money became infinite, everything else became unstable. The system kept expanding, kept inflating, kept stretching, until we reached a point where even the smallest shock could tear the whole fabric apart. And that's exactly where we are now. If you want to understand why the world is fracturing financially, why nations are moving away from the dollar, why inflation has returned with a vengeance, and why the next crisis may be the biggest one in a century, you must start with the night Nixon ended the gold standard. That was the first domino. Everything since has been the fallout. But here's the twist, the part nobody talks about. Nixon didn't create the crisis, he revealed it. He exposed a truth the world still struggles to face. The modern financial system survives only as long as people believe in it. And belief is not guaranteed. Belief can break, belief can collapse. Belief can end, just like gold convertibility ended on August 15, 1971. The day money died wasn't just a historical moment. It was the beginning of the system we still live under, and the beginning of the cracks we're watching form right now. In the end, the Nixon Shock wasn't just a policy decision, it was a warning. A reminder that no empire, no currency, and no promise lasts forever. The United States broke the link between money and reality. And for 50 years, we've been living with the consequences. Now, as debt skyrockets, as trust deteriorates, as nations search for alternatives, we are entering the late stage of the same cycle that destroyed every reserve currency before the dollar. The world didn't end in 1971, but money did. And the replacement we built, the system we live under, is now approaching its own moment of truth. The question is not whether another shock is coming. The question is whether we'll recognize it when it arrives, or whether future generations will look back at us the way we look back at Nixon. wondering how we didn't see it happening right in front of us.